Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brandt, joined with my regular co host, the excellent James Rhodes. Very chirpy, braid eyed, bushy tailed. I'm happy this morning. There's a pep in my step, and all the darkness and negativity has subsided. So, this is going to be a jovial podcast. Happiest place on earth for an hour, right, mate?
Yeah, exactly. We'll
No,
try.
it is nice, I have to say, to do this after United have won.
Yep.
And
It's
you know,
been
I
a
felt
while.
I felt the energy from a lot of people. You know, that people were getting tired of the constant cycle of negativity, not just with
Yeah.
United, but in life, in the news cycle, everything else. And you want respite. You want a place where you can have some sort of a relief from that respite from the cycle of negativity. And yeah, I totally understand that, and that was really pleasing to see United get a 2-1 win at the weekend. Lots of different talking points. Of course, we'll talk about what happened with the leg. We'll talk about lots of other things. Fenerbahce coming up this weekend. This week on Thursday will be a tough enough game.
That'll be an interesting one, won't it?
Tuesday, of course, and you know, there's at least some positivity to reflect on. I'll ask your views, mate, on the game at the weekend before I give you mine.
Yeah, I agree. It's I kind of went through the same thing of thinking I'm so tired. I get real tired of being negative myself,
Mm.
on so much of these things. And I've shared my views, and obviously as we went through the international break, we know it was the big talking point the whole time was on Ten Hag and his future, and I think most people are sitting there saying on the same page at that point, which was kind of crazy to stick with this because things have been so bad and it's crap, and we all feel that. But I'll give one kind of just positive take that I've taken away from all of this as well, and where I kind of set my mental framing ahead of the game, which I think did help because the first half was a little bit rough in general as well. But my positive kind of mental decision, and I think you do have to kind of decide sometimes to be positive and sort through it because it's really hard to just have it be that way naturally when things aren't going well. Was just that I guess one of the positives of them sticking by this is as fans, players, everybody around United, you kind of just have to settle in and say, okay, that's what's happening. And we have to take the positives we can get out of this. We're going to continue with what we're doing. And it almost was like I couldn't feed into the negativity anymore. Not
Mhm.
like a rock bottom thing, but in a sense, almost that way. Like, all right, it's gotten as bad as it's gonna get, but we're still going. So what can we take away that's positive? Because everybody gets tired of feeling absolutely horrible about a sport, about football, about all of it. Us, coaches, players, anybody involved. And I thought, all right, well, maybe we can take some positives from this. If there's a long-term change, fine. If there's a change later, fine. It doesn't matter. Right now, what could we take away? There's a lot of good players at Manchester United. And I think that's the positive that I would take from the game at the weekend and how I felt about it. I thought the first half was rough, and we saw a lot of the issues. But I think in the second half, and especially for like this 20-25 minute stretch, we at least saw talent that's there, the players that are there, and they're still trying and they're still giving it and they're still going for it. And when it comes together, it's still really fun. It's still really fun to see it, work when the front three, especially I talk about the front three in the game of the weekend as being most of note. Their combinations in that second half to come together on those two goals from the cross from Marcus
Yeah.
Rashford, from the interplay and the finish by Garnacho and Hoyland, which were both absolutely beautiful finishes of absolute top quality at that point in time. Um, you can see there's a lot of talent and there's a lot of good things to think about with United. Hoyland is a young player and he's been impressive since he's returned from injury. Garnacho continues to be very exciting, as a player, and there's good things, and when you watch Delict, despite everything that's happened through the season, bloodied and bruised, and he just
Mm.
keeps going and going and bleeding and going and bleeding, and had a
Mm.
fantastic game. I think was easily perhaps our best player over the course of the 90 minutes. It's good. These are positives that you can take away, and I think things that you can admire through the haze of what has been a poor start. So there were some good things to like, and that hopefully, at least can continue.
Yeah, look, in the immediate aftermath of a game, you're reacting to the result,
Hmm.
and it's superficial, analysis because you're emotional and you don't take everything into consideration. The next day, you're reacting to um, a much more granular analysis because you're taking into consideration all the other
Yep.
antecedents and perturbations that affect the result on the field, which are relevant when passing analysis. And I'm happy because of the result. But I was looking at the first half. I was thinking about the first half, and I thought there was, United go in 1-0 down, and inevitably, of course, criticism towards Ten Hag is, is same as it's been, and I totally understand that. It's reaching a crescendo, but I thought there was two moments that stood out in the first half that he can't be held responsible for that were major contributors, maybe even three really, to United going in 1-0 behind. One, Christian Eriksen has a chance that is 15 yards. He's maybe 12 yards. He's well inside the 18-yard box. Center of the goal, no pressure on the ball. He puts the ball over the bar. Now, you have every right to expect a professional footballer to put that ball away.
Hmm.
Changes the game completely. Okay. The other one, of course, is the Delict thing. Now, I don't. There's two. I have two positions on this. One, I watch a lot of boxing, and cut men do very good with about a 45-second window. 40,
Yeah.
they get a minute in between rounds, but essentially 45 seconds to stop the bleeding. And they're going back into combat. I, a lot of times they're very good at doing that. I'm United weren't. The other aspect of this is if this is a 30th minute, I can understand the referee saying you have to go off and get this clean. But this is 10 seconds before the end of the half. So why was it okay for Delict? Because that dried blood was on his head for a while. Why was it okay for him to play, 10, 15 minutes with that, but not another 10, 15 seconds? It obviously had an impact on the goal. But the other thing is, James, Diogo Dallo's defending for that goal was a disgrace. And I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I don't like using that word because I think you can be overly dramatic. But if you look at what happened against Spurs, the goal that he conceded, that to me was unacceptable because that's simply about desire.
Yeah.
And he really made no effort on that goal to get ahead of his attacker and
Hmm.
just looked like it
Yep.
was a token effort. And if he really is concerned about this, I mean, United should on a corner should be able to deal with the one player being out. They should be able to reorganize quickly. The near post is where the danger is. Diogo Dallo just let who scored for Brentford? Who was it?
It was a center back. What's his name?
All right. Well, we just let the
Yeah.
Brentford player go
Yeah.
right past him, head ball into net unchallenged.
Yep.
I praised Dallo, of
It was
course,
Pinnock. Yeah.
about 6-7 weeks ago, and I've thought about it ever since. And I've of course, like many times when you praise United or praise a player, they end up making you look silly.
Letting you down.
I genuinely thought he'd made progress. I thought not just in terms of his game, but in terms of his maturation. And he's being used as an example in how professional he is and how he trains. But those two things, I read a stat the other day. I can't remember it exactly, so I won't quote it, but it'll make the point for me. How many goals have come from United's left hand side? And the number
Yeah.
was staggering, James. Right?
Yeah.
They absolutely must get a left back
Yeah.
in January. The Terrell Malacia situation is probably the most bizarre injury situation I've ever seen in football, where nobody even knows what's going on with the lad. And if he can't get onto I mean, I feel sorry for him. Obviously, it's a terrible situation, but I don't think we'll ever see this guy in United shirt again. I mean, we keep hearing he's close, he's close, he's close, and he never plays.
Yeah.
And
And even if he does, to
yeah,
what
what level is he
level?
going to be at?
Because
How long is
it's
it
a
going to take for?
really
Yeah,
high level, making it on the pitch to being a
correct.
United left back, at this level. Big
And
gap there.
yeah, so it's a thing they have to address in January. It's still a
Yep.
major weakness in the team,
Yep.
and I think that that is a massive problem for United. But yeah, first half poor, second half. United won this game 2-1 last season, but this game was totally different.
Yes.
It was totally different. Last season, you got two late winners. United reacted. They came out with intensity. It's always happening when I record this podcast. It never rings any other fucking time. Look at
The last remaining landline in the
yeah,
US, and
I swear to
it
God, I told
rings
my
during.
girlfriend not to call me at work. Right? I think she liked me. Anyway, but I I'm looking at the second half. They came out with intensity. They came out that where I felt like they, that shows you when tactically they weren't that much different, but the attitude in the
Correct.
players
Yeah.
was totally different. And then
Yep.
you saw the result, and two very good goals. Garnacho's goal, magnificent. Rashford has now he created more chances in that game at the weekend. Adam Bateman put this up on Sky than any other time in his United career. I believe I'm quoting that correct. Um, he's looked really good on the right. He was exceptional. He's been exceptional, give or take one or two
Hmm.
games all season, scoring goals,
Yep.
creating goals. Brilliant finish from Garnacho, brilliant finish from Hoyland. And the other thing that it shows is when Rasmus Hoyland is injured, United are a totally different team.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting, that dynamic, and it's like, one of the things you said stood out to me, because I was looking at it and thinking, when the second half opened up and United were better, unlike other times, like there's times you can see they make a change, right? Or the other team makes a change, and then United are worse. Like they make a
Mhm.
substitution, and the personnel changes, and the way that they're playing changes, and you see the difference on the pitch. I don't see like any difference. And I was sitting there watching, and I was like, why are they better for these 15 to 20 minutes? Why were they so much better all of a sudden? And it is exactly as you said, because I haven't really found anybody be able to say, oh, they made this huge adjustment and suddenly they were able to play football really well. It was kind of as simple as it seemed like they were more committed for that time. And I'm not trying to say they don't try during the other times, but and this, not to put this into a negative, but maybe to spin this into a positive light. One of the issues that I think is serious, that Ten Hag does have to address now, because some of the things we did in a Brentford game as well as the Villa game were a lot more sensible. The fullback staying wide instead of cutting into the midfield, Lissandro being played as a natural left footer was helpful. He stayed wide during the game, and I think that helped. Diogo Dallo was staying wide during the game, and they did the same thing at Villa. Instead of inverting and doing this
But
really
Dallo
kind of
goes
awkward.
centre when United attack because you see that centre running. He
Yeah,
runs
and,
over
and
the top,
he
he got the
he
ball.
made
Yes, I know
that.
what you mean.
Yeah.
Yes.
Overall on their shape, they stayed
When they
wider, at
defend,
least.
yes.
Yeah, at least defensively, they were a lot wider, so we weren't getting caught in these transitions with the fullback in the middle. And there was a lot of basic things that they did that were good. But one of the things I've realized as well in recent times, where we're looking at, okay, United can be good for 30, 40 minutes or 20, 25 minutes, is, quite frankly, in my opinion, that's all you're going to get when you're playing Christian Eriksen and Casemiro in the midfield, because they still have to cover a lot of ground. One of the things I noted time and time again in the first half with Christian Eriksen, and this is the trade-off that you're getting with him at this stage in his career, is when they would press, he was a step slow to cut off the passing lane for his responsibility in it. He'd be a step slow to that. De Ligt would come up into the midfield and win a header, and he'd be two steps slow to the second ball, and the Brentford player would get it. And it would happen kind of time and time again. And the gaps are still a bit big there. But with those two players at this point, I don't think you have the energy to put in 90 minutes of high intensity football from them. It's just never going to happen, right? Um, and I think that that is where, certainly we need to get, Manuel Ugarte going. Now, not trying to skip ahead too much, but we will see him, I'm sure, on Thursday, because Bruno Fernandes is suspended. We only have three healthy midfielders, which is
Mm.
Casemiro, Eriksson, and Ugarte, so they should all play. But and it's also that for the long term, we've got to get younger and more intense in a midfield. When we've noted the teams that have walked all over us, Spurs, Liverpool, the games where we've struggled, the midfield, we know for the last 18 months, it's constantly feeling like it's been overrun. Like teams are outworking us there, out playing us there, outdoing us there. And when we can follow up the intensity because we have such, Garnacho, Hoyland are very athletic, very fast, very quick players. And when we can follow up the pressure that they're putting, Rashford as well, obviously, the pressure that they can put on a team through all areas of the team, I think we can look so much better, but they don't seem to be able to sustain it. I mean, I think we were good, but after 20, 25 minutes, we kind of just settled into the game again. And it was like, it was good we scored those 2 goals during that period of time, but it kind of settled in again. And we defended well and kind of sat off a bit and all of that. And that's fine. But I think that's sort of the one of the things that just has to be solved for the long term. If we want to see more consistency, I really struggle to see how we're going to do it with those players. And it's not trying to criticize them too much, but it is the trade-off you're going to get with Christian Eriksen. We saw it against 20, same problem. A step slow, he tires quicker, and
Yeah,
it's he just will, and we have to figure out how to play more intense more often. It's still kind of that one little frustration when you watch Liverpool or City or Arsenal is how much more intense they play throughout the entire game than United. And you can see when United
yeah,
do it, it's great. But how can we actually do that for longer stretches? Not even 90 minutes, but 60,
yeah.
70
Look,
minutes.
for when you get to the point where you're controlling games, that's usually when you are confident, when you have
Yep.
momentum, when you have consistency in the lineup. But Ten Hag again unlucky. Mason Mount. I worry about him if he's
Yeah.
not a million miles away from Anthony Martial territory, where
Yeah.
he
Because that's
just feels,
another one that would fit this, right?
feels
The
like a guy
intense.
that
Yep.
just really unfortunate with
Yep.
his genetics. I don't know, but just feels like a guy that is going to be constantly interrupted with minor tears, injuries, and beyond the physical, the psychological damage that does. It's
Yeah.
deflating for people. And then when you don't trust your body, you're not going 100% because you're afraid of getting injured again, and it's very, very difficult. Um, I think obviously you have with the Kobe Manu injury, which is we saw how United the first half of last season without Manu, and then when he came in second half, how transformative that was. Kobe Manu is such an important player for United. So I don't think Ten Hag is blessed with enormous options in the middle.
Yeah.
Ericsson wasn't particularly happy about 2 months ago of not playing enough. And I understand. The other thing, of course, is I thought it was interesting that Bruno Fernandes had a really decent game second
Mm-hmm.
half and set Hoyland up when he's not playing on the same team as Xerxes. So all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden, he's now playing with a number 9 that sits higher, where
Yep.
they're not competing for the same space, same ball, and the outlet ball's actually there. Because I saw a couple of times when Xerxes came on and United were attacking, he was still significantly behind the play.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in his defense, James, I feel like Xerxes needs to grow his way into a team like United. If
Yes.
United are winning games, nobody mentions the fact if he comes on, has a bad game, doesn't score.
Yep.
So, but if United don't win, don't score, then there's enormous focus on him. When Weghorst played that position, Weghorst, maybe I'm misunderstanding what type of player he was, but to me, he was an old-fashioned number 9 target man, but could also do a job filling in as a link player. So I think with Xerxes, he's not a number 9 target man. His main
Yeah.
job is link, drop deep and still provide goal threat. So in some sense, I'm more encouraged with Xerxes, where it's like, okay, I can see that
He's
he
doing
can do
that
more
part. Yeah.
eventually, but
Yeah.
he just doesn't seem like he's completely ready for the role of being main striker. Hoyland comes in, Hoyland gives something completely different on the field, and I think he's probably the only number 9 at the football club that would have scored that second goal, been in the position to
Yeah.
take it. And I think if he can stay fit I was listening to the Talk of Devils podcast, and they were talking about the hyperbaric chamber that United now have, and
Yep.
a lot of the different training methods that are being used for Hoyland to build his physical strength up to try to avoid picking up some of these niggly injuries that interrupt so much, and then takes you a while to get back on your feet, and then it takes you a while to get rhythm, and then if you're losing confidence, you're getting criticized. It gets harder. I mean, I think he's a really talented striker. If they can keep him fit, then it's so transformative for United up front. Um, I mean, there was a point on Saturday when United were the lowest goal scorers in the league. I mean,
Yeah.
that is,
Yeah.
we're not going to focus on the negative, but there's so much. He's so important to United for a central goal threat that he stays fit. And the other one player that I think deserves mentioning is Johnny Evans,
Yeah.
because when Johnny Evans came back to the club, I thought be fringe, eventually go up on the coaching. And I say this, I might have mentioned this before in the podcast, probably have I'm old senile, so I'm at that point where you tell the same joke a million times thinking it's the first. Johnny Evans is someone that grew up a mile away from me.
Yep.
Where I grew up in Belfast, we played for the same youth teams, Commonly Colts. Um, so I take a lot of pride in seeing his success and development. His father's a massive United fan. His brother played for United too, Corey. And I've had the pleasure of meeting Johnny Evans. I actually bumped into him one day over there, serendipitously, and he was brilliant with my kid, everything. He loves a football club, and he's been putting in exceptional performances week after every time he plays James. I mean,
Yeah.
he never lets United down, and I think he has been fantastic.
Yeah, he has, and obviously deserves a lot of praise for that. Because I mean, he said it himself that he never expected to play as much as he's been playing, and I don't think United have as well. It's
Mm,
good news, Lena Yoro returning to individual
mhm,
training today. United announcing, and obviously that doesn't mean he's ready yet. It's probably still 3-4 weeks. They're going to be careful with him, with the foot injury that he's had.
mhm,
But I think, not saying Johnny Evans isn't enjoying playing, but I think he would admit himself that he would prefer to probably play a little bit less than he's had to,
mm,
and where he's at now, and hopefully we can help with that, with getting some of the health in the team. But yeah, I'd agree with you, and I think that moving forward, my question, the point you made about Bruno, about Xerxes, about Hoyland, all these things are interesting, and that's the puzzle that I'm still sitting there looking at and saying, I think that for us to have a overall could carry some momentum moving forward, and to perhaps build on this season a bit, and at least have it be a positive. I personally have major doubts of any chance of us really competing for anything more major than, of course, that we than a cup game or something like that again. But if we want to build on something, one of the things I think that we do have to figure out. I'm not saying you can't rotate, but the team is already so much, it's totally different. I mean, we're 8 games into the season, right? That was the 8th Premier League season game, and it's a totally different 11 than you're starting the season with, and it's a totally different midfield, and it's a totally different front three than you're starting with. And I understand that. We do have to, at some point, I think, figure out the balance of what is the actual best 11, because I still don't think anybody knows, what the best 11 is at United, and how to make it work with all of these different parts, because we
mm,
do have a lot of talent, but they're different. Like, Ahmad is a different player than Alejandro Garnacho, right?
mhm,
And when he's playing on the right, he's a totally different player to Rashford playing on the right. Even though I think Rashford's probably one of the most flexible players we have, to his credit, which is why he gets moved around a bit. And like you say, Xerxes and Hoyland are totally different, and their dynamic with Bruno is going to be totally different. And then I notice as well, when you do that, Ericsson is less influential. When Bruno is more involved and you have Hoyland, then Ericsson is a bit less influential, and that's a good thing too, because you don't need him to be. It's kind of, you get these kind of balances where it's like one player's good, one's bad. Well, how do you get it all put together right? And I think that's the major puzzle. I'm not sure I have 100% the answer,
Well,
and obviously we
here's
need
the thing
players to
on
be
that, Jim.
back, but how do we figure that out?
Well, first of all, I don't know when in modern football, maybe you know your best 8 or 9, but
Sure.
best 11 somewhat depends on who you're playing against. Okay,
Yes.
because there's people with different attributes. So, and maybe it's not the worst thing in the world if there's it's your best 11 is not obvious because there's a lot of quality and depth in the squad
Sure.
where you could easily see. But I get what you're saying. Um,
I mean, mostly like things like the midfield,
yeah,
it's still kind of chaotic sometimes there, and I don't know what we're
yeah,
doing.
but again, even with that, right? So, if you look at certain games, if you're, where you expect to dominate possessions, you want to pick two holding midfielders, maybe you can. I
Right.
totally get what you're saying, right? And obviously,
Yeah.
with modern football, rotation is very, very important. But the other way this gets solved is players themselves. If you
Mhm.
have the shirt, it's yours to lose. If you don't
Right.
play well, you're going to get rotated. If you have exceptional form, the question's settled. The only
Right.
time you're getting rotated is in games like where you need a rest, but you're not
Yep.
being dropped because of poor form. So it's really up to a player to decide, I'm going to make sure you can't drop me. So you have to. This is part of the problem with teams that have inconsistency, like United. You get
Yeah.
inconsistency in the team because they never own the shirt. They never come in and say you rotate. You see this. I'll bring us back a little bit too. I remember when Jurgen Klinsmann was being criticized as a US coach. I'm like, yeah, but the problem is nobody owns the shirts. Nobody
Mhm.
gives you a reason not to drop them.
Right.
And where if you drop them, it's enormously controversial, and you have to win, right?
Yep.
You know, I was critical of Ten Hag dropping Marcus Rashford when he was playing well, but for the most part, it's really down to the players to make sure
Sure.
there's no way you can leave me out. That's their job. So, with United, obviously there's been huge disruption with injuries, and of course, you'll get some tactical variation against teams where this player's suited to that particular team, and that player's, you'd see this a lot with United, even with Ferguson, picking certain teams against. I remember he used to pick Phil Neville against Arsenal all the time, and so to me, it's probably in modern football, you're talking about your best 8 or 9, but I get what you're saying. I
Yeah.
don't even know what that is
Yeah.
because
I feel
well,
like we've had one player, I know, and I know we're both very usually generally very positive on him, but I do mean this objectively. I think Marcus Rashford's been the only player I could say has been consistently good through the course of the whole season so far. Bearing in mind injuries and things like that, because Hoyland missed a big chunk of the season. He's been good since
mhm.
he's come back, and Garnacho was even not fit for start of the season as well. And
I would
you know,
have to
and
say
I,
Onana's done well too, man. I would say Onana's
Onana,
been, yeah.
that's a good point. I would agree with that. Onana as
Mhm,
well, and I would never rotate the keeper anyway. I think Mazraoui was very good too. And he'll be back shortly. But beyond that, it has been inconsistent. I mean, we've seen
of course.
Lissandro struggle heavily. We've seen Delict has had some really good games and some really not
Mhm.
so good games. We've seen the midfield one game to the next been good or bad. And yeah, so but it makes it tough, but I think that's part of the reason, of course, that it does change so much. Is it's like there's been very few players we'd say, yeah, 3 games in a row they
Exactly.
keep performing, so they're going to keep getting picked, and you can build
So
around that.
when Ten Hag's first season, when United went on that run, where they
Yeah.
were within a couple of points of the top in January, and they were
Yep.
you knew what his best team was.
Yeah.
I
100%.
mean, more or
Yeah.
less, you knew that was, Lissandro. You knew that, you could pretty much name most of that team.
Yep.
And he very rarely rotated in that first season. In fact,
Yep.
I would argue he didn't rotate enough in that
Yes.
first season.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was obvious then this is pretty much his best team, give or take one or two players. You knew
Yep.
who was the outstanding players in that team. Um, but you mentioned Euro there, which is exciting to see him return. And when he got injured, one of the things that I'd said to myself, I might have mentioned on his podcast too, if there's one slight positive, it gives him more time to adjust to life in England, to a
Yep.
different culture, to observe the speed of the Premier League, the demands of the Premier League. And if United started badly, he would not be you know, uh, he would not be tainted by that. So the fact that yes, he's had a couple of months to he's not contaminated by what happened at the start of the season. Can you
Yep.
imagine the criticism this kid would be under, James? If United
Yeah.
were conceding goals like this, would I mean the media would have savaged him.
Yep.
So
Yep.
the kid was able to, adjust to life in England. I mean, he's only 18.
I know. I
I
know.
think people need to understand. Some people do. When you move to another country, the culture shock, the change is massive. It's so difficult, and you have to adjust to so many new norms the first year, and
Yeah.
you get homesick. You miss. You're still a kid. You miss the things that you took for granted, and it can be hard. So your head's all over the place the first year, and then you settle down. So in some sense, I think it might have helped Euro to be able to adjust to
Yep.
life and not feel the pressure of being battered every week by the media and be out of that. So um, I think he's a very talented young boy, and I'm looking forward to seeing him playing for United this season.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point too, because one of the like we've been talking about, for instance, Joshua Zirkzee, who's also quite a young player as well, right? He's
Mhm.
was he 20, 21 something? He's not old
I
for
think he's
sure.
like
He
22 or 23, but yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
he's
he
still
won the
young.
Young Player of the Year for Serie A, so we know he's a young player, and he's had like one full professional first team season,
Mhm.
similar in a way, of course, to Rasmus Højlund when he moved. Now, Rasmus Højlund, we all know, is a great finisher, a fantastic goal scorer. We can see his talent. He didn't score when he arrived until the 19th game week in the
Mhm.
Premier League,
Yeah.
and it does take adjustment for these players to get in and to figure it out and find their place in a team and all of that. And so it is advantageous. And I think it's really important with all of the new players, especially, that we give them time on that and not acknowledge a lot of the immediate calls people want to calling people flops and successes and things like that on transfers at this point in the season because it's far too early. And I think that when you look at that, I think Joshua Zirkzee will come very good because you can see the talent that is there, but it takes time. It took time for Hoyland. It takes time for him. I think it is advantageous Euro getting in there, getting this time away, and then that we signed Delict, I think is valuable because Delict's had ups and downs too. But one of the things that is well known about him, obviously, he's played 5 years at big clubs already, Juventus and Bayern, 5 years. So he knows how to deal with the pressure. He's also very well known to have been, character-wise, one of the most mature, strong individuals, out there. Even when we were way back linked to him back in 2019, I think it was right.
Well, he was
So
ex-captain when he was a
yeah,
teenager.
yeah, at 19, and then and then he made that move, and again 5 years at have real. I mean, Juventus and Bayern are really high pressure environments. As far as you get in Europe, across Europe, those are big places, and he's not shied away from that. So I think that's actually very helpful because if Euro comes back and he doesn't play right away, or he does and Delict does, it's not a big deal. Or they play together. I think it'll be very beneficial. So that's good. So can I ask you then, just based
Mhm.
finishing this part of this discussion, do you, in your view, who would you pick? Like if all healthy, who would you pick in the team for, let's say, the midfield? Like who do you think fits? How do you think
Mhm.
it fits how we want to play? Do you have any idea? Just
Yeah,
opinion
so,
purely.
the midfield is a bit interesting because, to me, the two obvious players you have to pick are Manu and Fernandez to me. The third one, you know, Igarte is obviously the what's expected to be the long-term
Yeah.
option. And I watched that Spurs goal a couple of times, and there was many players culpable, but I think he might have been the biggest because I'm watching his trajectory of his run, and if he continues, he would clear the ball of Van de Ven. But then, there's multiple players that were culpable on, but I think Ten Hag, he hasn't started him in a game since then. Maybe felt similar. So there's still a lot of adjustments on his part. Um, as hopefully he can be the successor to that, but I'm really not sure. And this is what we were saying earlier about the rotation: is that you know, sometimes the team picks itself out of necessity because there are a few other options.
Yeah.
Um, but to me, I think if everyone's fit and healthy, the two I would have obviously would pick would be Fernandez and Manu. The third, I don't know. And I think that United badly need a midfielder in there defensively with defensive, who's naturally defensively minded,
Yep.
who isn't like Casemiro, where you're pushing forward, you're still scoring goals, you're still a
Yep.
valuable asset going forward. Someone who just is perfectly okay with doing the dirty work in midfield. You know, I would love to say would be like a Conte, that is very, very effective at simple stuff.
Yep.
But one of the reasons why Luis Enrique wanted to move him on was because they didn't feel he was great in possession. So this is a little bit of a concern. But we have players in there that are good in possession. Um,
Yeah.
that third player in midfield when you start Manu and Fernandez is really, really important
Mhm.
because they are providing cover defensively in a way that the other two won't. Manu's very, very good at other things, but that is a big position United have to get right.
Yep.
And I don't think Casemiro can do that role. If even in Spain, James, it's just much slower pace. There's more time on the ball. You have lots of defensive cover behind you. You're dominating 99% of the games in possession. Come of the Premier League, United aren't dominating possession in games. They
Yep.
are, constantly under pressure, and you're being asked to play a different game.
Yep.
So I think that defensive role in midfield is one United haven't solved, but have to get right. And I mean, we would have to say Agarte is the obvious third player for me at the moment.
Yeah, and I think that obviously that's probably what he was signed for. I mean, just
Mhm.
in terms of his defensive work and all of that, where volume wise he's done big numbers there. And I was saying earlier on, one of my hopes on the positives with Ten Hag staying here and them continuing on this is that what I hope United don't do this season, and I know it's a fine balance, but when you talk about the Project 150 or whatever it is, you want to win the league in 3 to 4 years, right? Well, it means you have to start building consistently now with the players that you want to win the league with, not with players who won't be here. That's part of
Correct.
the challenge. And the problem with playing Casemiro and Ericsson that I feel overall is that if Ten Hag is constantly under pressure for his job, he's going to pick the players who are more ready today, that are not going to be here in 3 to 4 years. And I can't blame him for that because when results get bad, that's what you do. If you have to win, that's what you're going to pick, right? But Casemiro and Ericsson are not just unlikely to be here 3 years from now; they're unlikely to be here next season. They were unlikely to some degree to be here this season, you might say. And that's one of the things I go back and forth on. And I say that, my hope is that if there's not this constant scrutiny every single day on is Ten Hag getting sacked, is Ten Hag
Mm.
getting sacked, is Ten Hag getting sacked, that he can almost force it in a little bit and say, okay, we're going to play Ugarte, we're going to play Mainu, and we're going to play Bruno. Now, I think you have a lot more flexibility in those other two positions because you could play Ericsson where Bruno is if you want to rotate him and give him a rest. We saw it against in the cup game. We won 7-0. Ugarte, Casemiro, and Ericsson, they played really well together, the three of them. But it was kind of the same setup, the same system, and you can start to move some of the names around. But that's sort of my hope, is that across the board, if Ten Hag isn't under pressure so much every game, game to game, game to game, that we can kind of force in a little bit more of a long-term view
Yeah.
and build on it, because it's going to take time for Ugarte to adjust. We see it with all the new players. I think with midfielders, it's even harder to adjust. I mean, Casemiro looked poor even when he briefly showed up, which is why McTominay was starting. And then he looked really good all of a sudden and kicked on from there. And we've seen that with a lot of players. So that's kind of my
I think it's
hope
hard.
is, yeah,
You,
it's a
you
tricky
could,
balance because you still can't go losing a bunch of games. If you go
yeah,
lose to West
yeah.
Ham next week, it's going to go crazy again.
You,
And it will. And that is tough, and it's one of the problems I think that Ineos and the management have left themselves with the manager situation as it is that it does end up being so many questions all the time that it's hard to ask Ten Hag to say, "Hey, don't worry about results, just
yeah,
pick
I
the
never want to
team."
waste your time.
How do
where
you
that.
do it's that's
So James, if
tricky.
you look
That
at
is
City,
tricky.
there's a reason why De Bruyne and Rodri play every week. There's
Yes.
a reason why Mateus Nunes, didn't work out. Calvin
Yep.
Phillips didn't work
Yep.
out. Um, in midfield, this is such a hard position to
Yep.
bleed young players. This is essentially where the game's
Yep.
won and lost. Right?
Yep.
You can get away with the Euro, you can get away with a Hoyland in central defense and midfield, it's striker, but in midfield it's hard. Right?
Yep.
So in Ten Hag's defense, he's brought in Kobe Manu, who's the future of United's
Yep.
midfield. Right? Um, I don't know if City, Arsenal, Liverpool are starting an 18, 19-year-old academy kid in their midfield. Okay. Very, very difficult. Liverpool held on to Thiago and Fabinho for as long as they could, James Milner for as long as they could.
Yes.
Had to try to put Trent Alexander-Arnold in midfield. They also tried to play young players in there, Bacetic, the Carvalho, what have you. And it's a ruthless position
Yep.
because young kids need to make mistakes and they're so obvious and overanalyzed. And then what happens is, and we see this online, people attack them ferociously, and people create an identity that's built around attacking certain people. So
Mhm. Mhm.
I've become a major. Let's just give you an example. I'm not a major Ten Hag critic, which because that's now part of my shtick and part of my identity. I'm incapable of giving him praise when they win.
Yep.
So United winning is almost offensive now to me because I'm so now
Right. Yeah.
invested in them
Yeah.
losing and proving me right that he's a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
That United winning provokes a negative response from some fans that are like, well, yeah, it's just Brentford. Oh, it's shite. Oh, this was lucky. And this is where, you know, the social media is totally contaminated because now people are getting followers of like-minded people that are also
Yeah.
invested in this player, who hate this player, who hate this player. And these are people that call themselves Man United fans. I mean, I've had people say to me, I hope United lose fucking every game for the rest of the season because dickheads like you want the Ten Hag to stay. I'm like, you're a Man United fan. You would
Mhm.
want Man United to lose every week to prove a point to me. I
Yep.
mean, who talks like this?
Yeah.
Right? As a Man United fan, you know, and so what happens with these young players is it's a ruthless, ruthless world in clubs like United because they are. I mean, I even saw this with Manu at some point, like the first couple of games.
Yes.
He's over, and we knew it was coming, right? And
Yep.
these are idiots who don't understand the difference between a bad game and a bad player. These
Correct.
are idiots who have no concept of what goes on at a professional football club. I listen to people say, about this was going on. As Benny McCarthy said, James, the training sessions are top notch, very technical. But the idea that people at this level don't know how to coach is so insanely fucking offensive, ignorantly offensive to anyone who's ever played football at any decent level. I mean, first of all, to get your coaching badges to be licensed to coach at this level is a long process, and you have to display a level of competence. But to get through the levels to be able to coach at this level is extremely difficult. And I can tell you that these people, have a forensic knowledge of tactics and all this stuff. The problem is human beings,
Correct. Yep.
psychological. So we talked about second half, all of a sudden, where's that intensity? It's
Yep.
here.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
leading human beings, even being in a marriage, right? You profess undying love to each other, down the aisle, and a year later, you want to fucking kill each other. This is the way human relationships go.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult to keep human beings aligned and selfless so that they don't pursue individual goals, right? At a club, by
Yes.
the way, who for the last decade have prioritized individual goals. Look,
Yep.
United made a decision in 2013 that was completely antithetical to the football club, a decision that had never been made before in the history of the football club, and that was to redefine success as financial, not football. So they
Correct.
created a culture of self-enrichment, of
Yep.
people working towards individual goals. You're a brand. The most important thing you can do is monetize your commercial value. Don't really worry about winning trophies. What we care is that you qualify for revenue streams. Hence why they went pursued the Super League, where they removed the jeopardy and the merit towards that guaranteed revenue. You to change that culture seeps into the walls. It seeps into every aspect of that business. And in a regular business, it's easier to do because you just get rid of employees at a football club, it takes forever to turn that around. So, this is a big, massive football club that you can't fix a team till you fix a club. That any of us will have to will take time to get that culture out.
Yeah.
But for young players and stuff at United used to be protected. You don't get protected. I mean, you had people inside this football club feeding scumbag outlets information on their players, on their fucking employees,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So that they have, because they were working towards their own agenda. Imagine how
Yep.
that feels as a player to know
Yep.
that your employer is leaking information to people that attack you and abuse you every fucking day because they don't like you. That's a very
Yep.
difficult. Look at Angel Gomez, these young players, they can go abroad and develop away from that pressure.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
it's hard, James. I sympathize with Ten Hag on that because Ten Hag has to focus on immediate goals first before he realizes any future. So saying, hey,
Yeah.
Craig Artie, even if we lose, he won't be here because he will lose his credibility. But I
I
get what
agree,
you're
and
saying.
yeah, and that's the challenge, right? And I think in essence, it's somewhat of the unfortunate because I think in theory, if you had a manager in their first season, they get more leeway to do those types of things, to make those types of mistakes, to ride it out a little bit and grow. Everybody being where we've at, having the experience, the fan base having lived through the last season, which was like our worst ever, and all of that, and having to build on top of that, it is hard. And but that is sort of my hope anyway. I think it's
Mm.
harder than it seems to sustain, being overly pessimistic, even for the majority of people, not for everybody. There's always people that are just going to do it no matter what, just constantly. But I think for the majority of people, it is actually hard for them to sustain pessimism and negativity towards something. And one of the things I wonder a little bit, I just wonder about this, is that if continuing to go the way that we're going, because how do I put this balance? Like it is going to take years to sort this out, right? And when you look at things like the jobs, people quitting, people leaving, United losing all these employees, and you get, and I'm not saying these aren't valid, but you get the sob stories in the media, and you get articles being written about XYZ guy was crying when he
Mm.
was leaving, and Ineos as management kind of just have to ride that out, and they
Yeah,
know
of
that.
course.
They're
I've no
well
doubt a lot of
aware
them
of
are
it,
true, but that's
and
that's yeah, I agree with you 100%.
and you can see even there people getting in an uproar, turning, and I've seen people saying the dumbest shit, the no better than the Glazers and blah 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 because they didn't change the manager, for example, during
Mm.
the time. And I get it. I get why people are upset, but I almost get the idea, like, look, if we just stay the course and just keep it going, even if it's bad, even if it's this, even if it's that, it'll quiet down and it will allow us to do some of the painful things we need to do on the pitch that we have to do as well off the pitch. And it's much more obvious on the pitch, right? Like it doesn't bother your average fan when 250 people have to be let out of a job. It doesn't bother them. They don't see it. It's out of sight, right? You don't see those kind of painful steps happening. They're just happening. And you'll hear about them a little, but they're just happening. On the pitch, going through, I'm just this is a balance, but it is tough, and it's something I think about a lot. This painful thing of saying, if we have to just pick the players we want to pick for the long term and lose games in the short term, at some point we're going to have to do
Yeah,
that a
I
little
don't know.
bit. But
I,
it's
I
it's
I don't
hard.
know
It's hard. I,
because if
and
you're
I
losing games, where's the guarantee the players you're picking will ever start winning games?
I agree with that too. I agree with
So
that too. But I think there is a balance. There is a balance, of course. But you have to. I'm not saying you have to do it every game, and that you can afford to lose every game or anything like that. But you have to be able to lose games, to
yeah, of course. I
develop,
mean,
and sometimes be embarrassed and things like that. It has to. You have to be
okay.
able to do that. That's where I'm getting at,
So
and it's tough. It's
if you
tough.
remember in '99 when United went to the Club World Cup, they were faced with enormous criticism, and at the time it was put to Ferguson, "Hey, look, in one game in the FA Cup in the third round, why just don't you play a lot of your young players?"
Right.
And his response was, "Because we're in the process of building careers, not destroying them.
Mm,
And if you put players in before they're ready, the thing is that as you go through any level in life, what you have to accomplish at the next level is confidence that you can play there because you don't
yeah.
know, right?
Yep.
If you go in." you start losing games, you make mistakes, you're getting crucified, the media's on your, that psychologically is really damaging
Yeah,
to a
yeah,
young player.
yeah, yeah.
So that's why you always try to get a balance between experience
Yes,
in your team
yeah.
and where players are looked after. You know, you'll hear lots of stories from young players like Lee Sharp coming into the United team and Brian Robson, protecting them. You know, if you look at Real Madrid, they're preparing for the immediate, but also, the future. They have a balance between experience and youth. And, if you expose young players to that level in a team that isn't winning, it's very risky
Yeah,
because a lot of kids, a lot of young players don't have the life experience yet. They're on social media, and you go back previous generations, they didn't have to deal with the social media criticism
mhm.
aspect.
That's true.
You have to be mentally very, very strong. You can do that at other clubs like Brit. This is why the loan system is very
Yeah,
important.
yeah,
Where it's what you say. It's okay, you have to be okay with losing games because this is
yeah.
what you can do that at other clubs where
It's
it's
easier
not
for
a
sure, like
crescendo
you
of
say, yeah.
criticism. Where within 2 games, a young player's being called shit.
Mhm.
Fucking fraud. You know exactly what's coming.
Yep,
Brighton, if you have 2 or 3 bad games as a young player, no one notices. At United,
yep.
you're there, right?
Yeah,
And so it's a very difficult environment. When Alan Hansen said you can't win anything with kids, he'd be right today. Be
yeah,
very, 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 very difficult to do that.
yeah.
And
But it's just
you
a it's
also want
a
to
balance,
emerge
I
organically. Like you've
yeah,
accomplished this on merits, and
yep,
so I think that I know about planning for the future and I understand that, but I don't know. If you bring in young players before they're ready, it
yeah,
is it's United, these top clubs, it's so difficult. I mean, you
for
can have a
sure.
Pedri and a Gavi where they're just so obviously outstanding, or Lamine Yamal that are
Lamine
so
Yamal, yeah,
obviously
yeah.
outstanding.
Mhm.
United had this with Scholes and Giggs and Beckham,
Yeah,
they were so obviously outstanding. You couldn't keep them out of the team, but
yeah.
they were also in a team that had experience, that had, Cantona, that had lots of experience in that team, that protected them, Steve Bruce, all that. And so I think that it's really hard to get right.
Yeah, for sure. And it is a balance. It's more to me, my hope is that if it's not pressure every week, what I don't want to see United settle into this year is like a negative grinded out way where we never get into that aspect
Mm,
at all, because it's like it's always right on the edge, of the job of it, right on the edge of that position where it's like, where every game is like Aston Villa, where you're just
mm,
like playing shit football, settled in to grind out some points. Because I
mhm.
don't think that does anything for us in the long term. But it is finding the right balance. And look, I think that's Ten Hag's job, and I think that what he that him figuring that out. I hope he does. I hope he figures it out right, that it works, so that we
I'm going
see,
to remind you of this the next time you ask for practical football.
well, hey,
Just
wait,
getting
hold
out the
on, hold on,
result.
hold on, hold on, hold on. Because what I said, well, no, but it's funny because we've had this the other way, right? Because I remember that game against Liverpool. I said, in that game, why don't we just play pragmatic? Because I think there's times for it, right? Like what
Mm,
I think we can't afford is more Liverpool games, right? Where we just go get smashed. In that game,
of course.
I'm all for it. Go play extremely pragmatic. I don't give a shit. Play hard-nosed, pragmatic football and do not let Liverpool or City or Arsenal come into Old Trafford and give us another
Of
3-0,
course.
because those matter way more than any other game to the fans, to the media, to the storm, to the pressure, to the environment, to everything. Those are the big ones. Like if you remove that Tottenham game, you don't get nearly the Porto result and what happened there and the Aston Villa game. If you don't have that Tottenham 3-0 at home right before that, they're not going to be seen the same way. They're not going to be looked at the same way. And so that's where I think it is a balance. Like you don't want to go into that game again, a game against Liverpool at home and say, "Oh, we're just going to play a bunch of kids," and you lose 7-0 again, and it's like this
Well,
disaster.
let me
You
be
can't
devil's
do
advocate
that.
here for a second on this.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're Ten Hag, you're playing Liverpool, then you say to your team, okay, I know I have all these principles, values that we've been imposing on you week after week, but we're playing Liverpool and we're not good enough to beat them. So we're gonna play a different way. We're just gonna play backs to the wall. We're gonna play League Two level football and hope we get a replay. Just script. What does that say to your players about your belief in your own print. I'm not saying
Mm.
that's my opinion. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
to Steelman the opposing argument. What would that say to your players and about your confidence in your methods and your confidence in your principles? And if what would that say to any of us if, wait a minute, we're trying to build for the future. We have to be somewhat okay with losing games. That means you can't start compromising principles and values, or you'll never implement them. Because if you don't
Yeah.
trust them against Spurs and Liverpool, then why should these players trust them?
Well, it's an interesting question. It's an interesting debate. My personal view is you you implement them against the teams you should beat, and you try to minimize the damage. Just like and objectively viewing where United are at, we're not good enough to beat Liverpool. We're not good enough to beat Spurs. We're not good enough to beat Arsenal. Just not, right? And so I would look at
But
it.
when they play Liverpool, it was the second game of the season, was it?
Yeah,
Was it
yeah,
second or
right,
third?
third, yeah, because it was after Brighton and
Yeah.
Fulham. But I look at that and I think we struggle against any top 6 teams, like top 8 teams. We have one away win
Mhm.
against the top 8 under Ten Hag's entire tenure at United, right?
I
So
don't
I
know if he
know
could say it against Spurs, mate. I think that would be. I would be more
I
concerned
don't
about
think you
that
can
than
say
anything else.
but it is. I'm just saying
Mm.
objectively, it's true. We have been really bad against these teams, right? So my point is that I don't know that it's the right answer either, except when we went into Man City in the FA Cup
I mean, they
final,
didn't
we
lose against
played
Liverpool last
pragmatic
season.
football.
They
Sure, and
they
we played pragmatic. We did.
well,
We
I mean, they
grinded
beat
that
them at
out.
home.
Yeah.
Had
And
a
the
really
cup was
entertaining, yeah.
the cup
Away
was a
from
little
home, I can
different.
understand it.
Yeah.
If you're away to Anfield, you just need to get a point, whatever, fine. But I don't know. I understand what you're saying because there's two different things here. It's about being immediately pragmatic just to get a result, which is not
Yeah.
compromising our long term vision.
Correct.
Once
Yeah.
we perfect it, then we can implement. And
Yep.
maybe there'll never be a day when we don't have to tactically adjust to be pragmatic, even when we're at our peak.
Yeah. I mean,
Of
we did
course.
it and won the FA Cup final. It was pragmatic. That was a
I mean, FA
pragmatic
Cup
game
final,
plan.
I have to disagree. I thought they played exceptional. I thought they went for
I
the.
think
I
so.
thought they were dominated the game.
I think we played pretty pragmatic football,
Man,
but
they were 3-0 up. They should have been 3-0 up with
I
Rashford's goal. They
agree.
were until that ball, Onana dropped up. I thought United totally dominated the game. I didn't have any concerns about City. And United were. I have to say that I don't think that was percentage football. I thought they went in there, did completely dominated the first half. In fact, I can't remember any time in the first half where City had even a serious
No, I
goal.
mean, I wouldn't say
Remember
it was
Holland hit the bar
percentage football. Yeah, I mean,
and
I'm not saying like it
Rashford
was
scored.
like
Yeah, I have
I'm not saying
yeah,
it's
sorry, go ahead.
Jose park the Bucks bus type of football or something like that you have to do. But it was a little bit. I would see it as playing. I think it was a good game plan against City because you're not going to win the possession game against City. I thought it was a good game against them either
Yeah,
way.
I have to say, I would settle for that against City
Yes.
for 9 weeks out
That's
of
all I
10.
mean. That's all I mean. Like because I don't. It's about. It's like you say. Like, is it worse or better to go to a Man City game and say we're going to play our style and then we get battered 6-2 again, or
Yeah.
5-3 again, or to be a bit more careful and a little more compact and compromise just a bit for that game, because the City I think is okay. I think it's
You can do
acceptable.
both. I mean, I watched City
Yeah.
against Real Madrid, I don't know, a week or two before that in two
Yeah.
legs, and Real Madrid didn't do that to them.
Yeah.
This is, I don't see anyone do that to City, I'll be honest, in a long time. And this is
Yeah.
part of the anomaly. Or this is part, of the anomaly with Ten Hag is that he can do this and then we get what we saw against Spurs, where it
Yeah.
just I'm like, how is it possible that you can get a team to even when they beat City at home, in his first
Yep.
season, and United to win that FA Cup had to beat Liverpool and Spurs on that run, and
Yeah.
they beat Liverpool and Spurs easier than what the semi-final was against Coventry or
I
Liverpool and
know.
City. And
Yeah, yeah.
this is the
I
the
know, it's
paradox
weird.
where you're like, okay, I
It
don't,
is weird.
so some of it is obviously psychological, right? And
Yep.
how players execute, right? But if you're doing that to Pep Guardiola, you know how to coach James. I'm sorry, you know how to put tactics together.
Yeah.
Coaching at this level is not like coaching at youth level, because you're not
Yeah.
teaching, you know, seasoned footballers how to play football, right?
Yeah.
Most of what you're working on through the week is team collective. You want to do individual training to improve yourself. That's usually down to you. You can stay later with the coaches to do all that stuff later. But so this is part of why Ten Hag, even if you look at last season, all these statistical indictments on him were counteracted by other statistics where he had the most successful win rate of any Man United manager. And, over a year and a half, 2 years, he's won 2 trophies year after year. That's more than Arteta has won. You're
Yeah.
looking at this going,
Yeah.
this is weird, because it's very hard to come to. What I think if United sack Ten Hag and 3-4 years later, they're going through another two managers, people would look back on this nostalgically and go, maybe we gave up on him too quick. He won 2 trophies. You could see clips on YouTube of some exciting moments and you forget the bad moments. But I'm not going to spend any more time talking about my views on Ten Hag. Ironically, like the last three results aren't that bad. A draw away to Porto, a draw away to Villa, winning at home against Brentford. In what was probably the best 45 minutes in the league this season, I would say,
Yeah.
second half.
Yeah.
Maybe Southampton, I don't know. But but we've all been here before, and we'd love to say, this is a building block, this is start of
Yeah.
change, but no one trusts that really. Before we go, quick look at Fenerbahce. Fenerbahce up on Thursday. Very difficult away game. It seems like
Yes.
every game in Europe has been the same. Under Ten Hag, it'll be really interesting to see how United play in this game. What do you expect?
Well, obviously not just Jose Mourinho, but Fred and Amrabat in that team
No.
too. Players who know, but you also have to understand players with a lot of energy. And that's kind of what we're talking about. We're going to have to somehow match that, somehow beat that. Because unfortunately, one of the things we lost when Fred left was a player who would, for whatever reason, would every minute he was on the pitch, he was giving it 100%, and we haven't seen that kind of commitment out of necessarily everybody else. So we know we're going to be up against that. A very energetic midfield, very difficult to play against. Jose is good at getting results in Europe as well, and grinding them out. We're going to have to be good. We're going to have to be really good. Again, with Bruno suspended for the game, it pretty much nails on some of the selections that are going to be made there because we don't have that many fit players. I would guess Mazraoui should be back because he kind of sort of wasn't, but he was supposed to be available. So I would guess that he'll be back with Dalot starting. But maybe not. Maybe Ten Hag, I'm curious to see if Ten Hag wants to stick with Lissandro having a natural left footer on the left now until Luke Shaw and Malacia come
I'd
back.
like to see
Although
Mazraoui give a chance at left back. Wasn't that part of the
me
reason why he
too.
signed him? Like,
That's
why
that's
can't
what
we
I
swap it?
thought. Well, we saw him for 10 minutes the first time this season play on the left at the end of that Brentford game. And I would like to see that because he is very technical and good with both feet. And I think he'd be better. I think he'd be better there, and it would be better to keep Dalot on his natural side for sure for both of them. So I would hope to see that. I would hope you see Mazraoui on the left, Dalot on the right. You pretty much have to pick Lissandro and De Ligt because I think it's bordering on elder abuse. No offense to have to pick Johnny Evans for 2 games a week.
How long did Thiago Silva play for? Didn't Pepe play till he was 40?
Yeah, he played. I mean, they have, that's true. I mean, you get that weird thing with center backs because Chiellini played for ages as well, right? But
10 years
anyway,
older than Johnny Evans?
yeah, I think that hope that would be what you pick. The midfield, you only have three healthy midfielders: Eriksen, Casemiro, and Ugarte. So you're gonna have to play them. And then the forward line, I guess it depends if they're worried at all about Højlund from an injury standpoint as well, if he needs rotation or not. But I'd be shocked if it changes. Given Ten Hag's kind of style of management and goal scoring, I'd be shocked if we change the front three. Maybe flip them. I still prefer Rashford on the left more, but maybe flip them.
I thought
But
he played
otherwise,
really well, right, James?
I think he did too. I think in the first half, if he was getting the chances Garnacho would have gotten the form that he's in, he probably scores a few more goals. But that's all. It's not a big negative because I thought he was great on the right. I think he's just more. He brings more goal threat on the left. But either way, I think the team is in some respect picked itself until a few players return.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. Be a difficult game away to Fenerbahce, of course. Be amazing atmosphere.
Will
It'd
be
be a
intense.
test. It's very difficult to make any prediction with confidence with United because they just change so much from game to game.
Yep.
Um, they haven't been great in Europe. They're leaky in Europe. I don't think if they fall behind, I don't think they deal well with that. And I think they're still psychologically fragile. You know, Fenerbahce, I was, listening on the Talk of the Devils podcast. Perks were saying that they defend a lot. This was a team that lost one game all of last season and still didn't win the league. They haven't been as great under Mourinho as what they were last season.
Yep.
And of course, Fenerbahce, trigger a number of different memories for United fans. They were the first team to end United's incredible unbeaten record at home in Europe, but they were also the team that Wayne Rooney scored his hat trick against. Van Persie, I think I remember, a 4-1 win against Fenerbahce. But United aren't the United under Rooney and Van Persie. Um, their away record in Europe's really poor. The record in Europe under Ten Hag is really poor in general.
Yep.
And this is a game for me that United need to. These are the games United need to really start competing in.
Yes.
I'm concerned about them in Europe under Ten Hag, and I don't think he can afford another, Porto or another Galatasaray or another 3 goals conceded like they did away to Bayern, away to Copenhagen, away to Galatasaray,
Yes.
away to Porto. Like they just
We
this
gotta settle the
way too
European.
consistent. Like
Yeah.
they have to be able to deal with pressure and atmosphere, and if you're 2-0 up, find a way of killing the fucking game so that you
Yes.
don't let them back into the game and let the crowd back into the game. Be smart about how you manage a game of football. This is where, of course, experience matters. So I think it'd be a draw. I don't see United winning it, but hopefully it's not some kilometers 3-3 or some ridiculous result. The other thing that worries me in an atmosphere like that is it's an atmosphere it's ripe for a sending off.
Yeah.
And I really hope that doesn't happen. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I like I said, I'm not the win against Brentford was a win. It's great, but I don't trust that it's indicative of anything. But I really hope it is. If you draw away to Fenerbahce, away to Porto, it's not the end of the world. It's the draw against 20. The Fenerbahce drew against 22, I think, but that was away. That really is the eyesore on that.
Yep.
Yeah, it'll be a tough game for United.
Yeah. Well, it will
So
for sure.
draw hopefully. But all right, Manny, I will let you go, my man.
Very good.
Thanks to all of you for downloading the podcast as always. I hope you're having a good Monday wherever you are when you're listening to this. I hope you're well, your physical health as well, your mental health as well, and hopefully this is a bit more positive. See you later, James.
See you later. Thank you.